Welcome back to Unsolicited Advice, brought to you by Toxic Bubblegum. I'm Bubblegum.
I'm Toxic.
And today we're talking about fantasy. I'm using my fantasy voice. It's my thing now.
Yeah?
Uh-huh.
Got a fantasy voice?
Fantasy.
Good. I like it. We've got a quote. Fantasy fiction is essentially about the concept of power. Great fantasy fiction is about people who find it at great cost or lose it tragically. Mediocre fantasy fiction is about people who have it and never lose it, but simply wield it.
That's by Stephen King from The Danse Macabre.
Nice.
Nice. I don't know what happened to my voice.
It was your French voice.
My
French fantasy voice.
French fantasy. That's how you have to say it. French fantasy. That's the episode. We're done. It's not gonna get better than that.
No. This is a side note. I'm gonna start color coding our things in a more trolly fashion. I don't know what it is about the way that your computer's scaled. I have a really tough time reading the green
because it's like really
which
bright
is the
green.
only thing that I have to. Yeah, on my on my screen when I put the notes together, it's the other way around. I can't read the pink because it's too bright.
It's okay. I got you.
Thank you. That is going to help so much.
It's less bright now.
Anyway, this is our this is the second installation of our genre series.
The first one was romance, which we did back in February, and that was a long episode. We talked about a lot of stuff.
Yeah. And today, I don't think it's going to be as long because we spent a lot of our recording time doing bloopers.
Yeah, that's true. We already used up 2 minutes of that.
But we do have 3 parts. We've got 2 definitions of fantasy, we have our usual media segment in the middle, and then we have tips and tropes at the end. Ooh. Some helpful tips on how to write fantasy, and some tropes to be aware of.
Because
nice.
You know how tropes are. They're everywhere.
We've
all
got,
the time.
Our usual tropes thing, where it can be done well, but you should be aware of what they are, and that's why we compiled a helpful list.
Right. Because everyone should know what they are. Because you know them, but you might not have a name for them.
Yeah.
So
we named them I named them badly.
You could have gone to TV tropes and taken the names from there.
I could have, but I did not do it. But we'll make up fun names for them when we get there.
And isn't that more fun, really?
You'll get to see us doing creative advice in real time. And this one, Billy Joe Bob.
Yeah!
The trope.
I thought you were going to say Billy Joe
Armstrong.
Who is the chosen one?
He is.
He's
the Jesus of Suburbia.
He is. He's the chosen bisexual Jesus of Suburbia.
Yeah.
I love him. I love Billy Joe Armstrong.
He's great.
But that's not what we're talking about today, because he is a real person. We're talking about fantasy.
Yes. So, part 1. We've got 2 definitions of fantasy. The first one, I'm gonna let Alan read.
Yeah.
It is from findmeanauthor.com, and this is a really interesting fun fact. The definition for fantasy, just about everywhere, is bad.
Oh, yeah?
Yeah, because...
I mean, that makes sense.
Because fantasy is such, like, a wide term, so it either gets, like, too specific, or it's really long. This was the best one that I found in my research, in terms of giving you an idea of what the genre is.
Right, because as it turns out, fantasy is also a noun.
Yeah.
That's or an adjective, or it's many things. So, the definition of this fictional genre could be described as something that contains rudiments that are not realistic, such as magical powers, talking animals, etc. Fantasy is often characterized by a departure from the accepted rules by which individuals perceive the world around them. It represents that which is impossible, parentheses, unexplained, and outside the parameters of our known reality. Make-believe is what this genre is all about. Another description of a fantasy novel is any book that contains unrealistic settings or magic, often set in a medieval universe, and possibly involving mythical beings or supernatural forms as a primary element of the plot, theme, or setting. Something magical is almost always part of the fantasy, and magic may be seen in the setting or in the plot. It may even be practiced by the characters.
And this is, like, a really good, well-rounded, if you want to know basically what the fantasy genre is.
Right.
That's it.
And it's like, there's a lot of subgenres in fantasy also.
Yeah.
So it's like the fantasy, like, I think that does a really good job of outlining what makes fantasy fantasy. Because in this, you can see how, like, dark fantasy and, like, high fantasy, urban fantasy, and then even, like, superheroes and, like, supernatural creatures fall all under this umbrella of fantasy.
Yeah.
I think one of the things about fantasy is it's not always, like, the main... it's a main part of the setting of the book. Like, that's the entire thing is it's set in a fantasy verse, but it's not always the main genre of it. Like, because there's, like, horror fantasy, there's, like, adventure fantasy, there's, like, so many different ways. It's usually, like, sort of the... not subgenre, but, like... It's, like, an add-on to, like, what you would consider, like, a main genre.
There are not a lot of things that are solely fantasy, which I guess is where you get into high fantasy. Right. Which is also included under the umbrella of fantasy, obviously. Right. But for the most part, it is something that is included in other genres.
Right. High fantasy is your traditional... Like Dungeons and Dragons.
That's like your Tolkien-esque setting.
Right. Elves, dwarves, dragons, all that. What you immediately think of when you think of fantasy. Like the medieval thing that I mentioned. Yeah. So, yeah, Tolkien, basically.
Pretty much. But yeah. So that's like a good, if you want a definition of what the genre is. That isn't a technical definition, but it's very all-encompassing. Which I thought would be helpful.
That's good.
Our other definition is by a fantasy writer, George R.R. Martin. It was originally published in The Faces of Fantasy, which was annotated photos by Patty Parrott, which came out in 1996. Ooh. I think people always forget how long George R.R. Martin has been around for. Yeah, seriously. Because Game of Thrones just got to be widely so popular recently.
More recently.
In comparison to the all the stuff he was doing in the 90s.
Right. But the last decade is sort of when it is really taken off in the mainstream, as opposed to...
So here's our other definition, and it is definitely less technical, but it is a little bit more indicative of what the feeling of the genre is. The best fantasy is written in the language of dreams. It is alive as dreams are alive, more real than real, for a moment at least, that long magic moment before we wake. Fantasy is silver and scarlet, indigo and azure, obsidian veined with gold and lapis lazuli. Reality is plywood and plastic, done up in the mud brown and olive drab. Fantasy tastes of habaneros and honey, cinnamon and cloves, rare red meat and wines as sweet as summer. Reality is beans and tofu and the ashes of the end. Reality is the strip malls of Burbank, the smokestacks of Cleveland, a parking garage in Newark. Fantasy is the towers of Minas Tirith, the ancient stones of Gormenghast, the halls of Camelot. Fantasy flies on the wings of Icarus, reality on the Southwest Airlines. Why do our dreams become so much smaller when they finally come true? We read fantasy to find colors again, I think, to taste strong spices and hear the songs that the sirens sang. There is something old and true in fantasy that speaks to something deep within us, to the child who dreamt that one day he would hunt the forests of the night and feast beneath the hollow halls, and to find a love that lasts forever somewhere south of Oz and north of Shangri-La. They can keep their heaven. When I die, I'd sooner go to Middle-earth.
Yeah, that sounds like George R.R. Martin.
Yeah. Very, and it's good. It's
You can tell he's an author.
You can tell he's an author. You can tell, and this is something that I don't remember, I don't think I made time to go back and add it to the tropes list. One of the things I saw people complaining a lot about the fantasy genre is that the language used is too flowery too much of the time. This definition is a really good example of that. Yeah. And it's one of those you kind of love it or you hate it things. Right. But it is highly tied into the fantasy genre because fantasy writers tend to get a little bit lost in descriptions, I think.
Right. I think it's one of those things about fantasy is, like, a lot of the stuff you are inventing, so it's like you want to paint a very vivid description of it, because it's like, you're not gonna relate to this, you've never seen a dragon in real life, like, you've never seen a real live dragon, So if you're trying to express that, you have to go above and beyond, I feel like, to really hammer it home.
Yeah.
Or not even hammer it home, just, like, get the same feeling you would as relating, like, I saw a cat.
Yeah.
Like, I see a cat right here. She's gonna get ready to yell. Prepare for cat yells.
And that's something that actually I had like a bunch of other notes that I took after I had done the notes, and I don't think I went back to get any of them in there.
Mm-hmm.
That was another good thing, is that when you are writing speculative fiction, but particularly fantasy, you do want to use the senses. You want to use the 5 senses of your character to connect the reader to that environment. And you'll notice that George R.R. Martin, in the quote that we read, talks a lot about senses, which is, he was painting a picture of reality versus fantasy, but he used stronger senses for the fantasy to make his point, but it's something that you also get a lot in his writing.
Yeah.
There's this scene in A Song of Ice and Fire where they're having it's a 77-course feast.
Jesus
for
Christ.
The purple wedding. They have 77 courses, and all the dialogue and important plot points are interrupted periodically as the waiters are interrupting the conversation, and there are like these really vivid descriptions of what the food tastes like.
Mm-hmm.
And it's weird, but it's effective, because I remember that scene better than just about any of the other scenes.
Because it made you hungry.
Because it made me hungry. Like, I'm getting hungry thinking about it right now. So it's an effective technique. Like, it works.
I mean, it's one of those things where it's like one of the... I work at Starbucks, for those of you who don't know. I don't remember if I've complained about it on the podcast before, but I work at Starbucks. And one of the things, like, somebody made one of the secret menu options for butterbeer.
Oh.
And everyone, wanted it. I still have people come up and, ask me for it. And it's like, I know how to make it. Because it's delicious.
Yeah.
But it's, one of those things where it's, I remember, the food in Harry Potter really well. Because it was, they had the Great Hall feasts and everything like that. And it was like, damn, I want that.
They always, made you... I think that was one of the most impressive parts of the Harry Potter movie adaptations, was because they did such a good job making that food look like it tasted amazing.
Right?
And it's like, I can see it. I don't know when the last time I watched the Harry Potter movies was, but it's like...
Right? I can still...
the Great Hall feast, and I could see the Great Hall.
And it's the same thing with, the candies, too, because it's there was the chocolate frogs and the... Every flavored
beans.
Which was a disastrous idea to make real. But they did it anyway. But yeah, it's so those kind of fantasy things that even if they're just something that's sort of a part of the world, can really leave an impact when it's described in such a beautiful way like that, you know?
So... Nice.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So that's...
To wrap up part 1, are there any, other than food, what do you typically think of when you think of fantasy?
Dungeons and Dragons, mostly.
Yeah.
Because I'm a fucking nerd. That's all your fault, as it turns out.
That's true. Nerdom is contagious.
It is. But yeah, I think of that. I think of, vampires and werewolves and, traditional supernatural creatures. One of the things I think of a lot is Magic the Gathering, because it's just a bunch of fucking fantasy all splurged into one, which can be just really fun, going from location to location, because it switches genres, basically, with every different location they visit. So yeah, that's sort of... And then a lot of video games, also.
Yeah.
As people may remember, I'm a big fan of Spyro. Played a lot of Sonic growing up, which is obviously some form of fantasy. I guess it's adventure fantasy. But yeah, so... And Disney. I think Disney a lot.
Yeah.
Because they do a lot of fairy tales.
Right.
So, any sort of fairy tale thing is usually what I think of. What about you, Kat?
I typically think of Lord of the Rings as, like, my first thing. I talk a lot about Game of Thrones because it's such, like, a pop culture thing right now.
Right.
But, obviously, and again with the quote that I used from George R. R. Martin, he also thinks a lot about
right.
Middle Earth, evidently. So that's fun. I do typically... My first thought goes to high fantasy, and then it goes to slightly more contemporary fantasy. I think of Alice in Wonderland.
Yeah.
Is usually pretty early on the list, and Harry Potter.
Of course.
Because it's me. But, like, if...
You're also wearing a Coraline shirt right now.
I'm wearing a Coraline shirt. Because I knew we were doing fantasy today.
Yeah.
I was, like, halfway through... wearing a Silence of the Lambs shirt. And I was like, no.
Wait a second.
That's not fantasy.
That's unfortunate realism.
Unfortunate realism should be our next genre. So those are the... But if, like, I try to think... So those are the things that first come to mind. If I had to think of something to describe the feeling that fantasy gives me, I'd actually go with, like, Ocean at the End of the Lane.
Oh, yeah.
Because it's a contemporary story, but it has the sentiment of, like, what the fantasy genre encompasses. Mm-hmm. So I would think of that.
That makes sense. I remember... You really like that book, as I remember. I remember I was there when you were reading it. So,
yeah.
Because you, like, just got it, and you were super excited about it.
I was right to be. It was really good. It's one of the things I'm going to talk about for best examples of fantasy.
Ooh.
So, but moving into that, I guess.
Yeah.
Part 2 is our media segment, the best and worst examples of fantasy.
We're going to have some opinions in here.
Oh, we always, yeah. I'm like, and like the last one, I'm looking forward more to the bad examples almost.
Right. Well, we get to harp on one of our favorite things to harp on, so. Yeah. But we'll get there when we get there.
Yeah. So, best.
Yeah.
Do you have an example? Do you want to start us off?
I mean, we got a list right here, so I'm just gonna... I mean, Alice in Wonderland is awesome, consistently.
It's, and this is one of the things, because people make fun of me a lot when I talk about this, but Alice in Wonderland is one of the prime examples of surrealistic fantasy.
Right.
Which, it sounds very redundant to anyone who doesn't know a lot about fantasy, but fantasy... high fantasy, where the genre has its roots when we're talking about, like, Tolkien and things inspired directly by Tolkien.
They're generally coming of age.
They're very structured.
Right.
Whereas, and then you have, like, this whole other side of fantasy that I think gets really underappreciated as its own subgenre. Things like Alice in Wonderland, where it really is, there's a lot of nonsense in there, and it's not highly structured.
Right, it's just sort of, it's one of my favorite things about Alice in Wonderland, is it's really just really exploring how weird things can be.
Yeah.
'Cause it's, like, it has all the wordplay, and it, like, messes with the formatting in the book, but it's, like, everything feels... Like, because you're looking at it through the eyes of a child, and you're, like, so it's being described to you like a child would describe it, almost.
Yeah.
And so you sort of get this more innocent look, at all this just weird shit going on consistently. And it's so good, because, like, there's no high stakes in Alice in Wonderland. She's just sort of going around, doing stuff. I mean, the Red Queen is there.
Yeah.
Or, not the Red Queen, the Queen of Hearts is there, and is like, I'm gonna chop off your head, but I mean, like, she gets out before that happens, and that's at the very end of the book.
Yeah.
So it's like a lot of stuff is happening, but it's all, like, sort of just whimsical and fun, and it's like a day out in, like, the most amazing amusement park you can think of.
Yeah. And that's, I'd say more so with Through the Looking Glass, maybe, than Alice's Adventures in Wonderland. But it's something, it really does kind of have a good way of sparking that childlike, the way that you feel when you go to an amusement park.
Right, it's like,
better than you could imagine.
It's like, wow, look at this big, magnificent thing that can't exist anywhere else outside of this. It's like, and it's just so good.
Why, I'm consistently rereading it. I haven't in a while. I'm going to this summer, because for the summer I just read whatever I want to,
right,
instead of worrying about other stuff. But I'm, like, consistently rereading Alice in Wonderland, and it's because it makes me feel like a kid.
Honestly,
every time.
When I reread Alice in Wonderland, I get, like, really inspired to, like, keep working on my stuff, because it's just, it makes me feel, like, so happy and, like, experimental that I can just sort of push things around and see what happens.
It takes you into that mindset where you feel like anything is possible, and that's a really good mindset to be in as a creator.
Right. If you haven't read Alice in Wonderland, like, I highly recommend reading it over, like, doing an audiobook, because I think the formatting
helps a lot.
It's like, because, I mean, we've talked about, it's the mouse's tail, where it's actually formatted into a tail shape.
And the first time you see Jabberwocky, it's written backwards, because she's seeing it in the mirror.
So I feel like, if you're going to read it, I would highly recommend reading it.
Yeah.
The Disney movie is not a direct adaptation, but I think it takes some of the best parts from both books. The first one,
Disney movie.
The animated one. Don't do the Tim Burton ones. We had to talk about Tim Burton on the way on the car over. We're still mad.
Yeah. But that's a really good example of fantasy.
I love it.
It's good.
It's my favorite book, probably, I think.
Yeah.
If it's not my favorite, it's definitely, like, way up there.
It's pretty high up there for me, also. Okay. So, while we're talking about kids' books, Harry Potter, obviously. I talk about it all the time.
I don't feel... we've gotten into it a little bit, but I feel like we've never really done, like, a full talk about Harry Potter.
It gets... I think one of the most important things about fantasy is that it helps people deal with real things. Even though the, environment is made up, it confronts very real problems most of the time. I think Harry Potter is something that is really good at that, because it starts from that point of view of a child. Like Alice in Wonderland, the first book, you just get to see all of these magical, wonderful things and it's the best possible thing for a kid who's had to deal with a lot of adversity growing up.
Right.
And it's good. And then, as Harry Potter ages and as the audience aged with Harry Potter, we got to see some really big problems in the world that were, it was easier to deal with. It was horrific to see. The example that, because Half-Blood Prince and Deathly Hallows got dark.
Super dark.
But they have the thing in there that was essentially a Holocaust. It was like a magical Holocaust that they had going on when the Dark Lord Voldemort rises to power again. And they have the whole slogan, like, the magic is might thing. That was horrific. And they have a statue of a wizard, standing on top of, hundreds of muggles who are holding him up. And, because the whole thing for that was, because Voldemort is a racist. He's everyone should be a pureblood. Which, descendants from all magical families is his whole thing. So, it gets you into some really dark real world concepts without actually exactly going into...
Right. Because, it doesn't go into the same... Obviously, because it's not about that specifically. It's about that, but we're following Harry.
Yeah.
And he never, witnesses any of it. So it introduces the concept without, traumatizing.
Completely traumatizing children.
Yeah. Which I guess is important, probably.
Yeah, you probably don't want to traumatize your audience. But it's something, it confronted those problems, but so much of it was based around a fantasy setting. And it was good. It's one of the only successful things, I feel like, because in a lot of fantasy, using magic takes a lot out of a person. It's kind of like a stamina situation. Right. Harry Potter, it's not like unlimited magic, you can't do anything, but it doesn't... It's like an action. It's like any
bullets in
other
a gun.
thing. Yeah. And it's not... it's good because they incorporate that realism without making it seem like it's just a solution to everyone's problems.
Right.
And I thought that was good. It's one of the most successful at taking that route to using magic.
Right. And just as a side note, like, just because the things that are, like, on the best list, it doesn't mean that they don't have any problems whatsoever.
Oh,
because, like, everything has problems. There's so many problems with places, but I think it's one of those things where we're sort of talking about things that are more successful than they are, like, harmful.
These are things where the good outweighs the bad.
Right.
In an extreme way. Harry Potter does have its issues.
Right.
It's not perfect, but it does...
Right. So just because we're not addressing the issues at the moment, doesn't mean we're ignoring them.
Right.
We're just sort of looking at the pros for the sake of this list.
Right.
Because problems are like a whole other segment. Like, we would be here for so long.
Yeah.
If we got into, like, a real deep analysis of all of these things.
Especially because two of the ones... you brought it up for Harry Potter, but two of the other ones on the list, we've got Lord of the Rings and Game of Thrones on here to talk about, and those are two of the most problematic fantasy things. Right.
And Buffy has its fair share of
Buffy
problematic content also. But yeah, so these are just our favorite examples and, like, very popular examples in pop culture. We're not saying they're perfect, but for the sake of this list, we're just talking about how they succeeded,
right?
Rather than how they failed.
Yes.
So yeah, I just wanted to say that real fast, just so we're doing it. It's fine.
Okay.
Speaking of, Lord of the Rings.
Yeah.
Get into that one, or do you want to do Game of Thrones first?
Let's get Lord of the Rings out of the way. Lord of the Rings it's the high fantasy example. It was genre breaking. It was groundbreaking. Wonderful, wonderful series. Mm-hmm. It's like the grandfather of all fantasy fiction.
Yeah, basically. Like, obviously there was fantasy before, but I mean, this is what really took the world by storm as the fantasy genre, and there's a reason why so many things have been inspired by it. It's good.
Dungeons and Dragons was essentially created as like a Lord of the Rings game.
It was just a fan game the whole time!
It kind of is, actually.
I mean, isn't it, though? Isn't that just all what we're trying to be in Dungeons and Dragons?
Yeah.
Yeah.
It is. So yeah, Lord of the Rings and The Hobbit, obviously, are the two big ones.
Right.
Tolkien did a lot of other stuff. He did a lot of short stories. He did other novels. We're not going to talk about those, because the ones that made the biggest impact really are. And when people say that a fantasy novel is derivative, when they say that TV shows are using the same old fantasy tropes, it pretty much, what it's derivative of is Lord of the Rings, because it was the first big one ever, and it's, like, really held up.
Yes, it does.
Stood the test of time. That being said, again, like with the problematic things, there are issues that would not be acceptable if it were written today.
Right, of course. Because, again, it was, what was the 70s? Or when was it written?
Oh, God.
Hold on.
Before that.
I've got Google.
Like, way before.
Don't take anything. I didn't say anything. Let me find out.
Alright.
Yeah, the 70s is not correct. That's wrong. He was alive way before that. That's right, because he was alive at the same time as Lewis Carroll, because I read that graphic novel where he and Lewis Carroll and some other author all fought the devil together.
Right.
God, I wish I could remember the name of that book. That was the weirdest comic I've ever read in my life, and I've read a lot of weird comics.
So, yeah,
Keep talking about Lord of the Rings!
This is something I'm probably going to use examples from Game of Thrones, just because it is such a pop culture phenomenon currently. When we get to tropes, I'll probably be using the examples from Game of Thrones, but Lord of the Rings is where pretty much all of the fantasy tropes started.
Yeah, that's about right.
Especially the ones we'll be talking about today.
1954 was when the first Lord of the Rings was published.
Nice.
I think. Somewhere
Okay.
around there. That's what it said on Google.
That sounds better. That sounds more correct.
I was just 20 years off. It's fine. It's only as long as I've been alive.
Fine. But yeah, A Lord of the Rings is, because it was really groundbreaking, and because of the scope of the world.
Yeah, it's because then he wrote what's the name of the compendium?
The Silmarillion?
Yeah, the Silmarillion, which is just an entire lore book of the whole world, basically.
Yeah.
Which is... God, I wish that were me. I don't think there's any author who wouldn't just like to write an entire lore book of their world and have it just, like, really read and analyzed and enjoy the way the Silmarillion is.
Oh, yeah. And the thing is that there are authors who and I feel so weird saying this because it's the godfather of all fantasy. The Silmarillion is, like, the first book like that. There are books that are way more interesting to read that follow that same vein. There are lore books that are interesting as well as educational. The Silmarillion is like reading a history book if you lived in Middle-earth. Right. It's very dull, it's very dry.
It's history.
It's a history book. It's like a, 50s history book.
Right. But it made waves, which is...
Yeah, it paved the way for stuff to happen. And one of my favorite things in any genre, one of my favorite things in the whole world is dragons. And it's like, books like The Hobbit, things like The Silmarillion, they paved the way for dragons to be a pop culture thing.
Right. Dragons as we know it today, because they're the... Western dragons, as we know them today, in particular. Obviously, different cultures have different dragons. But the four-legged, two-winged, English descendant dragons were really made popular by this series.
Yeah.
So it's good. It did a lot of stuff really well, and it inspired a lot of people to take it and keep doing new things with it.
Yeah.
Which is I'd say that's pretty successful. I'd say Lord of the Rings, moderately successful. Did a lot of things, got to do something, and so that maybe give it a read sometime.
What? They should do, like, a movie. Or, like, an Amazon series.
The Rankin-Bass version, bro.
Yeah.
That's the one we're talking about?
Yes.
Ooh.
Those are the ones I grew up with. I say, having been a child that went to the theater to see all of the Peter Jackson movies.
Whoops.
Because my parents are big into the fantasy genre. My mom is big into the fantasy genre. So I actually did grow up with the cartoon Lord of the Rings and Hobbit.
That's so cute.
I read the books pretty young.
You read a lot of things pretty young.
That's fair.
You started watching horror movies when you were, like, in second grade.
I've got to read those books. Got to read all the books.
I have a hard time finding a book you haven't read. I don't know a lot of books, but you've read, like, all of them, so, like...
I'm trying. That's my goal, is to read all
Kat
the
is
books.
actively that person that's trying to read all the books in the world.
I'm being hindered somewhat because I keep rereading Alice in Wonderland.
It's good! It's worth it!
So, since we talked about Lord of the Rings, I think we should just transition right into A Song of Ice and Fire and Game of Thrones. Because they're very similar. Like, and it's one of those things, George R.R. Martin was heavily inspired by Tolkien. He wanted to emulate that feeling, and he did a spot-on job.
Yes.
It's a lot more character-based than Lord of the Rings was, which is a lot more appropriate for the market today. Mm-hmm. But that, like, he got the atmosphere down very well.
Right.
He got a lot of the archetypes, and he did a good job adapting tropes in a way that they seemed very believable.
It's one of those things where sort of the fascination with fantasy never died, really, but I mean, like, people were sort of bored of it, I feel like.
Yeah.
Because, like, even with the, like, Hobbit movies coming out, people were still like, because, I mean, like, they were fine.
That's the
They
thing,
were
is that, like,
okay.
the hype for Lord of the Rings finally died down after Return of the King, but then, The Hobbit came out, and everyone expected there to be a hype, and whatever the first one, because they all got parenthetical titles, and I don't remember what the Unexpected Journey.
Yeah, Unexpected Journey.
Came out, and immediately the hype died right back down.
Right, immediately. There were like 2 more movies. I never heard a thing about any of them. Legolas was there, I guess. God. Something. But anyway, but yeah, the hype for more fantasy stuff is sort of weeded out at that point. Like, there was nothing anyone was really, like, looking for in the genre at that time. There was nobody really who was taking it to a unique new place. Yeah. And that's what Game of Thrones did.
Right. HBO is... There have been a lot of controversial things going on with HBO lately. Lots of people complaining about stuff that they do. One thing that I do really admire them for is that they're not afraid to take big risks.
Yeah.
And they were like, a show is going to be the way to adapt a big fantasy epic like this. And they took Game of Thrones and they did something incredible with it that was wildly successful. Way more than they thought it was going to be. Right.
Game of Thrones is another... Like Harry Potter and Lord of the Rings, it took the world by storm.
Yeah.
Which is greatly promoted by social media and stuff like that. And the fact that HBO is already a huge network.
Yeah.
So it's like it helped a little bit. But yeah, because I remember, like, when it first came out, you talked about it, but I didn't really see anything for it until, like, it really took off, and then, because I was in New York, there were posters fucking everywhere for it, and I was like, what the fuck is going
on? It's something with Game of Thrones. I have, for those of you who don't know me real well, I have a tough time. I like to be ahead of the curve if stuff's gonna be really popular. I have a tough time reading something if it's already everywhere, because I just feel... going in like I have too much bias. Game of Thrones was 3 seasons in by the time I started, and I was so adamantly against watching it, because it's like, it's too big now. Like, I don't want to hear about it anymore. I'm definitely not going to sit down and watch it. And I was wrong.
Yeah, because now you're obsessed.
Because now I'm very obsessed. But it was... Because it was everywhere. You couldn't go anywhere without...
literally everywhere.
You're trying to go to the fantasy section of the bookstore, and you're, like, being bombarded by end caps filled with Game of Thrones merch, and it's like, I don't know what this is, but stop.
I don't know who you are, but get out of my house.
And, yeah. But it's good. Again, because we're just talking about the highlights, I'm not going to get into all of the stuff that it has done wrong.
Because it has done a lot of stuff wrong.
It's done the show in particular has done a lot of stuff wrong. But the books, they take all the best elements of different fantasy things.
Right.
It's like, which is something I really like, if you really like the female heroine trope, you've got a bunch of those in there because of the very oppressive environment for women. Like, we do get to see women overcoming stuff. We've got all of the setting and the lore of the Lord of the Rings. We've got... It's got a little bit of everything. It's got the drama of, like, a much lighter fantasy show.
Right. But there's a lot of fucking drama all the time.
And it has, like, those really dark elements, too, that... I think out of all of the ones all of the big ones that we're going to be talking about today, it incorporates more horror elements, while still maintaining that high fantasy thing. It's not like a dark fantasy, it's not a horror fantasy, it's high fantasy with a lot of horror elements.
Right, it's got sub-themes going into it.
Yeah.
So yeah, if you're looking for a little bit of everything, that has, like, that's been written more recently, definitely, like, check it out. Because
Yeah.
you're going to be able to find it. It's not going to be hard to find.
Yeah, and it would be harder not to find it, honestly.
Yeah, honestly.
So, yeah, that's
Yeah.
the Game of Thrones thing.
You did.
If you like the show, if you like watching stuff more than you like reading stuff, also, the show is really good.
Right. Just if you have any triggers, definitely, like,
If you have any...
look it up beforehand, because there's a lot.
If you have any triggers, I don't think you can watch Game of Thrones. That's like that's the one thing, is because there are so many.
I literally have to have Kat sit there and be like, okay, you have to look away now, and now, and now, and now.
Yeah, there's... Ooh, boy.
There's a lot. It's a lot. There's so much that happens.
That is
all
one thing, because we talked about how the show is a little bit worse than the book. I do think that the book was really good at taking topics that were dark or controversial or whatever, and getting the point across without dwelling on it. The show
dwells on it.
Do that.
It dwells on it so much, like, consistently.
That's the one big element where and the show, the show doesn't understand what consent is, the way that,
yeah, no.
there are a lot of, like, and it's weird to say, but there are a lot of very romantic things in A Song of Ice and Fire that came across as very
bad,
non-consensual in the show. A lot of the nuance was lost, and it doesn't look great on screen.
Yeah, it's just like, this is really uncomfortable as a concert. What the fuck is happening?
Yeah.
But yeah.
But for the most part, I feel like HBO did
right.
good.
There are ups and downs. There always are. So let's move on to something a little lighter than that. We have a couple on here, sort of.
I have these two on here. I'm gonna delete them real fast. No, I'm not, because I can't work the thing.
You don't know how to work a Mac?
I can't work a Mac. Anyway, I'm gonna group them all together under one subject, because I actually had a few more. Some of my... we should talk about Buffy.
We should talk about Buffy.
Let's do that,
also,
and then I'll group stuff
together. You know what we should also talk about? We should talk about Sailor Moon.
Sure. That also.
That's a good one.
I'm gonna let you talk about Sailor Moon. Because I'm a very big Sailor Moon fan. I have been since I was a kid. Watched the really terrible...
the English dub.
The English dub.
Same.
But I liked it. But it is, like, the epitome of a genre that I don't know a lot about, because it's that magical girl thing.
Yeah, it's the magical girl genre.
That and Madoka, are the only two that I want. I don't know how you categorize Madoka, honestly.
Madoka is a magical girl, quote unquote.
But those are, like, the only two magical girl things that I ever... Yeah. So as a genre, you should,
I'll talk about that. I'll talk about magical girls in general. But let's talk about Buffy first.
Alright, Buffy.
Buffy's good!
It's really, really good. It is definitely more dark fantasy than a lot of the things that we've talked about, because it is contemporary fantasy that is very creature-based.
Right.
So it's different from the other things on our list in that way. But it does a really good job of incorporating different mythologies from different places and giving it its own unique feel without losing the roots.
Right. It's like, it takes something that's tried and true and does new things with it, while not going too far. Yeah. Like, going too far off the deep end with it. Because there is times you can push it too far, which we'll talk about later. But
just to clarify real fast, we're talking about Buffy the Vampire Slayer, the show.
Not the comics.
Not season 8, the comics. Definitely not the movie.
There was a movie. That's right, it was originally a movie. That's right.
And we're not talking about that. We're just talking about the show. We're talking about, like, the 90s to early 2000s. It was 96?
Yeah, something like that. Yeah. Yeah. Because I had a babysitter while it was airing. I remember that.
Right.
Because I got locked out of the room.
Oh no.
I was fucked up.
No Buffy for you.
No Buffy for me. It was sad.
But that's also, because we were talking a little bit last week, and I'm going to talk a little bit more about worst concepts, where if you branch out, you have to do it really well. And Buffy starts, the first season Buffy is a vampire slayer, and she slays vampires, and it's good. And it's like, but as it evolves and we get more demons and more other kinds of mythology in there, they're all really well incorporated. It's very seamless.
There's a lot of, like, when they introduce, like, a new genre of something, they introduce it and then start weaving it in. Yeah. Like, it doesn't feel like, there's not an abrupt...
It wasn't, like, 4 seasons of vampires, and then suddenly...
Right.
Here's, like, this very localized demon that we're gonna fight.
But there were many localized demons that they would fight.
Yeah.
But yeah, it was really good, and it was really funny.
Yeah.
Also.
And it was very empowering.
Right, especially, like, as a young person growing up, defab, even if that's not what you end up being, like, it's very... Buffy is a very strong heroine.
Mm-hmm.
She's, like, very smart, she's very strong, and she just about deals with all of her problems herself.
Yeah.
And it was really good to watch, because it was like, oh man.
And, like, it's another really good... There's a really awkward transition period right in the middle of the series, but it's one of the only shows to overall successfully transition from the high school dynamic to real life.
Right.
Which I think was really great, because Buffy is very much... She's that chosen one arc that... throughout the show, but we see that she doesn't get, because it's a secret thing, and we never see her get any, like, special treatment for it, and that's one of the things that she ends up having to drop out of college to do all of this demon fighting and stuff, and when she's trying to get back into the real world after all of this focus, she's taking care of her sister, she's trying to pay for this house that she can't afford, she's trying to get into the job market, but she doesn't have a college degree, and it's one of those, that was never the focus of the show, but we got to see very real-world struggles, and she never got, like, a free, you get out of this real-world strife because you're the chosen one.
Right.
It maintained that balance thing.
Right. So it did a very good mix of everyday problems with there's fucking vampires and demons and werewolves and shit everywhere.
Yeah.
You should probably also deal with that. That's important.
Yeah.
But yeah.
Not a lot of shows... I can't think of another show that's ever done it quite that successfully.
Right. I think Buffy was one of those 1 in a million that got it really, really strong on a lot of points. Still mad about Tara, though. I'll never get over that.
That was another point I wanted to bring up about Buffy, is I thought the way that they used, that they had humans using magic was really interesting, because there is a ton of magic, and if you're powerful enough, you can tap into all of it, but instead of having it be like a stamina, it makes me tired to use magic this much kind of a thing, they had it so that using magic was kind of addictive. It was like a drug, almost, and it was something, because it was a different take on magic, and it also dealt with that addiction problem.
Right.
In a fantasy setting, which was interesting.
Right. It's all the harmful effects of a drug without saying it out loud.
Yeah.
Which sometimes is what people need to see when they're struggling with more real-world addiction thing. It's the realization by association sort of thing.
And it wasn't nearly as preachy as I just made it sound.
Yeah. It really just sort of happens, because they're like sub-arcs. Like, it's never like the big... people do bad things and there are consequences for them.
Yeah.
I'm sad now.
And also sometimes, it was really sad.
And sometimes it's really, really sad, but sometimes you have a really funny episode because of it.
Okay, this is just like a completely random... I was watching one of those Watch Mojo lists.
Yeah.
And they had
our favorite pastime is watching Watch Mojo lists.
List theme was great episodes that almost ruined... Or terrible episodes that almost ruined otherwise great shows.
Yeah.
And Beer Bad was on there from Buffy.
What?
And I was like, That was much needed comic relief in the middle of the darkest arc.
Jesus Christ. Oh my god.
Please stop.
Please, we need the comic relief. It's important.
I was like really upset about that though until number 1 on the list.
Which was
the series finale for How I Met Your Mother.
Yeah, that's
correct.
That was the correct choice, as it turns out.
I'm less angry about that.
I will accept this slip up.
But yeah. Do you want to talk about magical girls?
Yes, I like magical girls. So magical girls are a genre that's particularly popular in Japan, obviously, in anime and manga.
Yeah.
There are some American anime girls. I can't think of any off the top of my head. They do exist.
What was that show?
Which one?
That kid show.
Which that was Italian?
Was it Italian?
Was it? I feel like it was Italian or French. It was one of those.
Okay.
Because I think it was, because Witch is one, and the other one is Winx Club was the other one, which are the more Western.
Yeah. Okay.
Now I gotta.
That makes sense.
Which. But it mostly originated in Japan, and I don't want to say Sailor Moon was like the first. Wow, I didn't. Okay, anyway, I'm gonna have to look that up later, because it's too specific to Google.
Oh, right.
I don't want to say Sailor Moon was like the first magical girl, because I doubt it was, but it really is what promoted the genre, and it made like such a big impact that it really made it over to America. And I remember watching it so much when I was little, because I wanted to be Sailor Moon when I grew up, which is why I started growing my hair.
Oh, yeah.
And then when I was 18, I finally got to dye all my hair blonde and be Sailor Moon. It was the best thing ever. Best cosplay.
That's also, in a strange way, why I grew my hair. It was like one of the, except for, it's one of those, I thought Sailor Venus was pretty.
That's because she is pretty. All of them are pretty.
It was like, they're very pretty.
I need to go back and reread, because I have like the first 8 volumes of it up in my room, and I need to sit down and reread it. But it's another one of those, like Buffy, where it mixed a lot of real life issues with being the chosen one. Mm-hmm. Because for a lot of it, we didn't even know that there was. What's up?
Really quick, I looked it up.
Did you
we are all correct. Because it is a French-American animated television series based off of an Italian comic book.
Huh.
So all 3 of those things are correct.
Wow! Thanks,
right.
Nice, Witch. Sometimes that's how it is. What's the studio? It's the same studio that did Totally Spies. I remember that, I think. Because that was a French show.
I'm not allowed to know what studio did it.
You're not allowed to know. It's okay.
I was like,
I think I'll live.
Okay.
But, so it's another one of those things that was like really empowering as like a young person who was defab, because it was like, there are all these kick-ass ladies and they're doing kick-ass things, and like, but they're still like people. And it's like, there's so much female solidarity in the series. Which is something I feel like fantasy is usually, particularly high fantasy, is a very male-dominated genre.
Right. Magical girls as a genre, I think, are really important. And this is also something we talked about in the representation issue, but they showed women being feminine and doing things.
Right? I think the tragic thing about Madoka is that over here in the West, it comes off as a really powerful female empowerment story. It's not how it is at all in Japan.
Right.
The guy who wrote it is a total misogynist. It's really bad, which becomes very apparent when you watch Rebellion.
Yeah.
Because holy shit, fuck that movie, I'm still mad. But like Sailor Moon, in contrast, was written by a woman who has a PhD in like astrophysics. So, like,
Right.
she's, like, super smart, and so she wrote the story to empower women and make that solidarity, and it's so good. I would recommend, like, probably reading the manga, because I never watched Crystal.
That seems correct.
And, like, I don't know how the actual Japanese version is, because I never watched it, but the dub is definitely what I grew up with.
Hey, hot take from me.
Hot take.
Controversial opinion. I'm about to make a lot of enemies. 100% watch the American dub of the anime. Just for, and this is gonna sound like a dumb reason, but they have Luna's voice.
Serena!
She's got like this really squeaky old woman British voice for no reason.
Oh god, it's
love
amazing.
I love that you knew exactly, because whenever she says Serena, she says it like that.
It's so good. And they also have like as bad as the dubbing was, because let's be honest, it was bad. It was really enjoyable as a kid, though.
It was so fun.
It was like so much fun.
And, there's that one character, the Melvin.
Oh my God.
And it's like, I hadn't watched the show for so long, and I heard his voice, and I just lost it. I didn't see the rest of the episode. It was so good.
Oh my god, no. God, I love fucking 90s dubs. They're so ridiculous. We're not quite Speed Racer ridiculous, where everyone's just talking super fast all the time, but still so good. So yes, please watch at least one episode of the anime just so you can see what the dubbing is like.
Yeah. And I'd also recommend the movies.
Yeah, the movies.
Even the dubs were okay.
They were okay.
They were like, the stories were really sweet.
Yeah, I think that's one of the things that Sailor Moon does really well, is it never really goes... Things get dark, obviously,
right,
as they always do, but I mean, like, I feel like Sailor Moon always keeps the positive atmosphere. Like, there's always a message of hope in it, which I feel like is one of those things that sort of does get lost sometimes in the fantasy genre, is everything gets too hopeless. Mm-hmm. And it's like, sometimes there's just good girls running around, kicking butt, being awesome.
Yeah.
And also going to the arcade and being cool. There's this one set that is like an image set that I tagged as Adventures. And it's, what is it? I think it's Jupiter. It's like, I think it's like Mercury is there. And it's like, I want to, like, learn how to swim, and Jupiter's like, you just gotta do it. And it's just like, so she just takes her and throws her into the water, like, clean across the pool. I think that's what it is.
That sounds right.
It's so good. But yeah, it's good message of, like, whereas a lot of, like, the fantasy stuff is, like, coming of age and taking care of yourself and all that kind of thing. I feel like Sailor Moon has a big message of find strength in other people and in yourself as well. So yeah, that's nice. It's good. Sailor Moon will always hold a special place in my heart.
Nice.
I wish I had more pictures of that cosplay.
Oh.
The ultimate tragedy.
I wish I had more. I had a lot of fun. Now I just want to talk about cosplay stuff. I had a lot of fun with that cosplay.
Yeah, because you were...
I went as Sailor Pluto. Who
also,
was great.
Lesbians.
Oh,
so good. Not cousins, like the American dub did for some reason.
Were cousins in the American dub. It was uncomfortable.
But no, Neptune and Uranus are so cute.
But yeah, and fun.
I think my favorite part of that convention was I told you were like, I can't spend any more money, but I want to go buy a notebook. And I was like, you can go and you can buy a notebook. And then you came back with a stuffed cat and we're like, I named it Notebook.
Yeah. I did bad. The really fun, the beauty of the story is that we were in an autograph line, and the reason that you said I could buy a notebook was because I didn't have anything for Todd Havercorn to sign.
And then we didn't even get to get anything signed by him. I did get a hug from him later on, though.
Yeah. It was nice.
My sister, like, caught him, and I was like, oh. It was a lot.
Yeah.
That was good. I met a lot of people at that convention, because I also got a hug from Scott McNeil.
Yeah.
That convention. Oh, so much. Anyway.
Yeah.
So that's our, anime
I also got to make, like, a staff out of a chair.
You
like,
did!
The night before the convention.
Honestly, that staff was so fucking cool, though.
The biggest problem, because the staff was, like, bigger than the car, so we had to make it, like, we had to break it in half to get it back in the car. It was bad. Oh. Anyway.
Good times.
And the last thing that I'll say for best of fantasy genre is that, and this is just me being me, I guess, my favorite, some of my favorite fantasy things are by horror writers. Horror writers, I feel like, have the capacity to write really good fantasy. My all-time favorite fantasy novel is Horns by Joe Hill. And it's dark fantasy, but it's good. Another, Clive Barker, is known, obviously, for the horror stuff, but he has really strong fantasy roots.
Because Abarat was...
Abarat, The Thief of Always, Imagica was... Like, Imagica is one of the best fantasy books, honestly. It's really good. It's like Abarat, but for adults.
Was Abarat for kids? It was supposed to be.
Imagica definitely wasn't for kids, let's put it that way. Abarat might have been darker, but Imagica was, like, very
explicitly
erotic.
Darker. It was sexy dark.
It was really sexy. And then... obviously, like, the Dark Tower series is really fantastic by Stephen King. So,
it's good.
Nice. And then if you want just, like, a good fantasy writer, Neil Gaiman. I'd recommend.
Course.
Neil Gaiman's important.
He does a lot of... He splashes across different genres, too, because he's done... Yeah. He's done, like, just novels, and then he's done, like, collaborative novels, and then, like, obviously, I know him from Sandman.
Yeah.
And graphic novels, so, like... There's something a little bit for any kind of taste you're looking for with Gaiman.
Right.
And he's great.
He's done
a great dude.
Kids book, Coraline.
Yeah.
Ocean at the End of the Lane I recommended. Stardust is really good if you're looking for, like, a fairy tale-esque. Stardust, the book.
Not the movie.
The movie... I have, like, this really weird thing. I saw the movie first, which I guess probably made me a little bit biased. I feel like the movie did a lot of things better, despite overall being worse. But yeah.
Sometimes that's just how it is.
Yeah.
That's good. But yeah, so, it's one of those things, it's important that just because you do write a particular genre, usually doesn't mean you can't go out into other, because certain elements from what you write might translate really well to fantasy. You never know. Like, you never know until you try.
Yeah.
Alright, we ready for the...
Are you ready to complain about some stuff?
Yes.
Some unpopular opinions?
Unpopular opinions.
One is really popular opinion.
One really popular opinion, one, like, medium opinion, and then one pretty unpopular opinion. Yeah. I don't know how unpopular it is anymore, though.
In the... Like, and just as a transition thing, I really hated the Coraline movie, you guys. Best kids book, worst kids movie. Just tossing that out there.
Tasty.
Unpopular.
I was like, fine. I was like, eh.
Coraline's okay. I feel like if I hadn't read the book, I would have liked the movie a lot.
Right, I haven't read the book, so, like, I saw the movie. So I was like, eh.
The movie's fine. It completely missed the point of the book in a lot of ways. And as a fantasy thing, I feel like it was really ineffective in that way.
The cat was cool, though.
The cat was cool. The cat shouldn't have talked, maybe, on one side of the thing. But whatever.
That's very true. So yeah, now we're moving into things we don't like. And as we've stated before, we don't like Twilight.
Yeah.
But I do want to say, we're looking at this just from a content standpoint. We're not looking at it, like, from, like, because of how it was marketed to young girls and, like, by a woman author and stuff like that. It did receive, like, a lot of, like, that sort of young adult marketed to young girls genre has a lot of bias, like, against it.
Right.
Culturally, people think it's, like, sort of a dumb, stupid genre, like, critically, because, you know, there's a lot of, bias against young girls liking things. That being said, Twilight is a horrible thing.
Twilight's bad.
Twilight's so bad.
This is an example of taking something and twisting it so far beyond recognition.
Right.
I thought it was really interesting this is another one of those things. Being ahead of the curve really made a difference for me. I thought that the mythology was actually kind of interesting up until the point where it became a standard thing.
Right.
Which I feel like it definitely shouldn't have been as big as it was, just
right.
for quality anyway. But it's like, you look at the mythology for the vampires, that you look at the magic element, the fantasy
right.
element, and you're like, it's definitely different. It's a new take.
Right.
That's interesting. It's different from the things that I've read. But then you have, because of how successful Twilight was, it became a thing where it's like, vampires are sparkly now, and it's like, that's not good.
Right.
That's not the direction that this needs to be moving in.
Right. It's like having a like, I don't even mind that much that it's in that book. Mm-hmm. Like, sure, it's fine. It's not the way I portray vampires or whatever, but I mean, like, they're not even technically vampires. They're like a different thing. Cold ones, they're cold ones.
Yeah.
Which is basically vampires, but like, they gave it a new name and they did something different with it, and I'm like, I don't even particularly mind that. Mm-hmm. But holy shit, the characters are so bad that, like, which is, like, what you're supposed to care about in a book more than the mythology. So...
And I'm not gonna spend too much time defending sparkly vampires to people, but I will there were some interesting concepts, if you look really deep into the Twilight mythology.
Yeah.
That were really wasted because of poor character development.
Right.
And, like, mediocre plot. It's something that, because I think one of the most interesting mythology aspects and most admirable things about the Twilight series is that some cold ones develop because essentially what it does is it makes you more. It's like you concentrate.
Right.
When you become a cold one. And it has given some people, like, magical abilities beyond...
Right, like Alice has the...
Like, Alice can see the future. One of the Cullens is an empath. Mm-hmm. And there are, like, neat things like that, because as people, we all have different skills, and it makes sense in a metamorphosis scenario that those would develop in different ways. And I thought it was a really interesting concept, but past a certain point, I couldn't care about that.
And I think it's really a shame, like, how the whole situation happened, because, I mean, like, it caused a lot of controversy.
Yeah.
And I mean, like, the fact is, like, no matter how strong your mythology is, or how strong your, like, lore is, if you don't stick the landing with the characters who are involved in that lore, mm-hmm. then it just falls apart.
Right.
You know? And it's a shame, because, like, there were some of the characters that I was like, this is an actually interesting character.
Yeah.
Like, I thought Alice was cool. I thought,
this was really neat.
Jasper was the empath?
Yeah.
One? I liked Jasper. Like, he wasn't there, but, like, I liked him for what I saw of him. And I felt like if it had followed anybody else,
right,
there could have been, like, a legitimate thing there.
And that's one of the big things about taking risks, is that if your story isn't good, people are more likely to criticize those risks. Right. And this is something that I've been especially bad about with Twilight, where mm-hmm. it's like I have that kind of misplaced aggression with it, where it's like, because the characters were bad, because I didn't care about the story, I got mad about things that inherently were just fine. And it's like, I don't think people would have picked on the sparkly vampires if the story had been good.
Right.
Because that wasn't our problem. That wasn't, like, the main problem with what was going on. And taking big risks like that can pay off sometimes.
Right. Like, a lot of, like, the Buffy vampires and stuff like that. Those were a big risk.
Right.
They were a general departure, because it had, like, the whole soul thing and, like, everything
and the
like that.
microchipping thing later on. It's like, they took a lot of big risks that paid off.
So it's, like, and, like, Meyer's not a bad writer. Like, she has a very unique writing style that drew a lot of people in, and a lot of people were willing to look past the bad characters because they enjoyed her writing style so much.
Yeah, that's one of the things, because she has a very conversational writing style. Like, they're very quick reads, despite being longer books for the genre, and Yeah, so it's one of those things where it's like, I know I have a lot of aggression towards Twilight because it caused me a lot of grief when I was younger.
But I do think it's, I just think it's a shame that so many good elements were just sort of wasted.
Yeah.
And then, I mean, like, also fucking, it made 50 Shades of Grey happen, so, like, I'm allowed to be mad about it.
That's fair.
Because holy shit, I'm mad about it. But I digress. Because that's not a fantasy novel. I mean,
it's bad.
It's just bad.
It's a bad novel.
Yeah. Well, speaking of vampires.
Yes. I put the Vampire Chronicles on here, and before I get in trouble for putting the Vampire Chronicles on here, Anne Rice has done a lot of good work.
Mm-hmm.
I actually really like the first, like, 3...
Yeah, like,
Four installations, maybe.
It's like Interview, Lestat, and Queen of the Damned are the first 3.
Right. And those are all good books.
Yeah.
I'm not gonna pick apart any of those books. This is, and I think talked about this too, but later on, it's like, as the author changed, her characters, instead of staying true to themselves, she tried to conform them to her ideals, and it made it really inconsistent later on in the series.
It was one of those things where Anne Rice is not a great person.
Yeah.
Like, if you look up anything with how she interacts with her fans, it's a goddamn nightmare. Like, if you want to look up the whole fan fiction fiasco with any of her stuff, you're in for a long and depressing read, because it's just a shame the way she abused her power and attacked her fans, basically.
Yeah.
But I really do enjoy, like, I didn't get to finish Queen of the Damned because I sort of got busy halfway through reading it and I never picked it up again. But, like, I really enjoyed Interview with a Vampire, and I really enjoyed Vampire Lestat, because I really enjoyed the characters. I thought they were great, and I really liked her vampire mythology, but it's just, like, she's, like, weirdly Christian, and, like, that sort of weaves in there at some point.
Yeah.
And it's, like, I don't have a problem with incorporating, like, Christian mythology or whatever, but, like,
and
it was already an established mythology she had, and then she, like, halfway through changed, like, the basics of it. You know?
This is something that always, like, really kills me, because I think Vampire Chronicles had a lot of wasted opportunities in there because it was inconsistent. I think you have to stick with your established world, but I also think that Christian mythology goes hand in hand with vampire mythology.
Yeah.
That would be such... I feel so bad because, like, all of the... for the most part, the books that have tackled this have been some of my least favorite vampire books, even though it's got so much potential. The later Vampire Chronicles really fall into that, because I had a tough time paying attention because it was so different from what had been established early on in the series.
Right.
But there really is just... Someone needs to do a vampire book that incorporates that mythology correctly.
Right.
That would be so...
It's, like, one of those things where it's, like, I really liked the, I don't know if she went back on this, because I never really got to proceed too far down, but she switch up the thing, because it's, like, there's, like, the source vampire, like, the old ones.
Yeah.
It's, like, and it's, like, when, like, one of them is hurt, all the vampires are hurt.
Right.
Did she ever, like, change that? Is that, like...
Not really.
Mm-hmm.
But, like, when they got back into the roots for it, it got, like... It got so preachy.
Oh.
Like, it was bad.
That is one of the things I will say about her work, is it does come off as very preachy.
Yeah.
Like, even
and
in
they
the
get
first
worse.
books. That is, like...
It's bad.
Yeah. It's a damn shame. Because the first 3 books are, like, really, really fun and entertaining.
And something, this is definitely more sci-fi than fantasy, but it's one of those things where it's like, when you as a person grow, it's hard to write in the same voice sometimes when you started a series. I think a really good example of where it can be done, not necessarily great, but better, would be Douglas Adams with the ever-increasingly misnamed trilogy, because he was becoming more socially aware and more politically motivated as he was writing the series. But the characters never, like, when the characters changed and when they grew up, it was reactions to things that were happening in the environment. He never went back on who they were initially. He never, like, changed the mythology in the universe. He kept moving forward, and when the characters changed, we got to see why.
Right.
And it's like, I don't think that I even would have I would have still quit reading Vampire Chronicles if it had happened like that, just because I really disliked the direction it was going. But I would have stuck with it longer if it hadn't been so abrupt.
Right, if it didn't change so suddenly. Because that's the thing, is you're writing a story, and you can't, if you're trying to continue it, it needs to continue, not just full stop, full start, you know?
At that point, just do a different thing.
Right? Like, just do a different series. It's fine, you can do a different series.
And don't harass your fans.
Don't harass your fans, Jesus Christ!
This was actually, strangely enough, this was something that they talked about in the last season of New Girl.
Oh, yeah?
Because Nick has been published by this point in time, and he does the series called The Pepperwood Chronicles, but they end up, as he gets happier and more mature as a person, Pepperwood stops being, like, the same character. He starts also being happy and mature and content, and his publisher's like, just do something else.
Yeah, like, hey man, you gotta do something else. Do, like, something with a happy, mature character.
Yeah.
So yeah. Ready for the last one?
Yes, I am.
So I don't know how unpopular this opinion is anymore, since we've really moved past when this was popular.
It's really overstayed its welcome.
Yeah. Is it still going? It's not still going, is it?
I don't... the 13th season just went up to Netflix.
Really?
And I stay behind, so I don't know.
Really?
It might be the... I don't know. We're talking about Supernatural.
Yeah.
It's bad.
I never even bothered to get into Supernatural. It was, like, one of those things where I was like, there's nothing here for me.
I feel like there are a lot of things in Supernatural that I want... Like, there are a lot of concepts in there for me, and I tried really hard to like it. 13 years ago, apparently.
Yeah.
It's got some people working on it that I really appreciate. Felicia Day does cameos as, like, one of my favorite characters.
It is still running, looks like, by the way.
God. But it's been going too long. And even early on, I had some big issues with it. The concept of dealing with just, like, different supernatural elements is really good.
Right. I mean, like, there are a lot of successful things. Ghostbusters.
Right.
That's the whole thing.
Yeah. That was the thing, like, with Buffy, and even with Angel, that was, like, what they did. That was what they did on Charmed, which is a show.
It definitely is a show.
That I have feelings about. I hate the trailer for the new one.
Oh,
I hate it. I don't like it.
No.
I hope it's just one of those, like, bad trailer things, because none of the clips looked, inherently bad, but they just,
like, edited together and they looked bad.
Edited together, they're trying to make it, like, too much of a drama. It looks like it takes itself really seriously.
No, it can't. It's Charmed.
Like, they can't do that, and I'm not happy about it. Also, one of the sisters was adopted. It looks like, from the trailer, like, she comes back and she's like, I think maybe I'm your sister, which happened in Charmed, but it was like, they had to write that in because they lost one of their actresses.
Right.
Like, that was when the show started going downhill. I don't like that they're just starting it there.
Don't start with that.
Anyway. There have been shows that have done, like, this supernatural exploration thing really well, dealing with, like, different kinds of paranormal things, but Supernatural, for me, it always just missed the mark because it tried to do too much with the mythology.
I think it also had too many bad tropes with the characters.
That's...
Also, they have a horrible habit of killing off, like, any female character that shows up.
Yeah.
Like, just so fast. Like, they can't stand when there's a woman on the set, I guess. I don't know what the problem is.
It's, and it's one of those things, I feel like I should use a different example, than my go-to, just because it's one of the least supernatural-based episodes, and we're talking about fantasy, but it's one of those things where it's like, if you're doing new mythologies, if you take things in a new direction, it has to make sense.
Right.
And Supernatural never did. There's this one episode in the first season that just kills me every time, because there's like I don't even remember what it is now, there's like a paranormal manifestation that's recreating urban legends, and they burn through like 6 or 7 of my favorite urban legends in the show, and none of them make any sense.
God.
And it's like, because we don't get to see the whole stories, because they had to pack so many in there for this ghost, and God.
A better idea if you're going to do that is you should do, like, 3. Yeah. Because then you can spend time on each one.
Or, just
stick with 1.
1 would have been more than enough. And then they would have had... I don't think anyone expected the show to go on as long as it did when it started.
As it turns out, it's still going.
Like, doing an urban legend episode, you know, you don't know if you're ever going to get back around to urban legends. But then, like, in season 7 or 8 or whatever season it was, when they did the Bible arc, and it's like, if you'd had more urban legends to work from, this wouldn't have happened.
Right.
We wouldn't have the Bible supernatural arc. That's the worst thing.
It's like, and there's so many urban legends out there also, like...
Yeah.
I think one of the things that also always bothered me is it felt very American-centric, which, I mean, like, isn't inherently a bad thing. But, like, I never saw a reason to really pursue it, because I sort of knew, like, generally how American urban legends go. Mm-hmm. Like, I'm a lot more interested in, like, urban legends from, like, other countries.
And it would have been, because we have America more than any other country, when you're looking at folklore and urban legends, is very based in reality, which for a show that is called Supernatural seems like a bad idea. Like, Japanese urban legends are so fascinating, and they're so filled with, like, fantasy creatures and spirits that would have been so much more interesting.
Right. It's, like, one of those things where if you're gonna take a source material and work from it, like, you really need to, like, if you're gonna, first of all, go on this long, and if you're going to really make a big impact, like, it's gotta be interesting. It's gotta be consistently interesting.
Yeah.
Which I feel like, again, Ellie, like, never grabbed my attention at all. Also, one of my big issues isn't even with the fantasy elements, it's just that the fucking writers are queer baiters, which is a big issue, so, like, I'm not gonna pick that up. Like,
yeah, they're really bad about that.
Like, just fucking, god damn it. So, yeah. That's another reason I never picked it up, is because there's additional issues, in addition to the fact that the fantasy writing is not the best.
Yeah, it's definitely something they could have done better. And one of my biggest problems, actually, I guess, still is technically with the fandom.
Oh god, the fandom is horrible.
Because it's just something, it really, really bothers me. I'm always getting corrected on my mythology because Supernatural got it wrong. It's like running a horror blog and dealing with the Supernatural fandom are 2 of my least favorite
things to combine.
Yeah.
But yeah, it's like one of those things where it's like, if it created a new mythology, that's fine. But it should be clear that it's its own mythology.
Yeah.
Which I feel like it never did.
No. Yeah. And that was going to be our last one. I do want to bring up one other thing.
Mm-hmm.
I want to bring up Wish Upon.
What the fuck is that?
Wish Upon, for those of you who don't know, which is everyone, because I was there opening day, there was one other dude in the theater. Wish Upon is a horror movie, question mark. That got really into Chinese mythology. And basically, I'm just gonna go ahead and skip to the moral of my story, which is that if you're basing a story in a culture, and the culture has had, like, the same kind of themes and has a word for it, use that word instead of another different word from that culture. Yeah.
Oh, no.
Wish Upon it's a Chinese-inspired horror movie about a wish demon, and there are, in fact, wish demons. The Baojiaogui, I believe. I don't know how to... I don't speak Chinese, I'm sorry. But I'm admitting that up front.
Right.
But they used Shigui as the name for the demon, which is actually the Chinese hopping ghost or vampire. Very different than the wish-granting demon that the movie Wish Upon was about. And it's like, I wish you would not. Because it existed. It was based off of a Chinese legend, and then they just replaced the name of the entity.
Of course. Like, you do?
It was like, it was bad.
Here's the question. How closely was it inspired by Avril Lavigne's 5 Wishes?
Oh my god.
Do you even remember that?
I have...
Don't you remember?
I have 2 issues of a graphic novel that never was finished, and I don't think anyone else read, called Avril Lavigne Make 5 Wishes.
God, I can't...
A girl named Hannah has...
Avril Lavigne.
Not Avril Lavigne. She's sad and alone and bullied, so she has an imaginary friend that is Avril Lavigne, and she and
God, I forgot that's how she was in there.
Yeah,
Avril Lavigne was the imaginary friend.
She pretends Avril Lavigne is her friend, and she gets a Chinese wish box. Was it Chinese? Was it a Chinese wish box?
Probably.
She gets a wish box, and she gets an Asian wish box and gets to make 5 wishes from the wish demon. And Avril Lavigne, who again, imaginary friend, stops talking to her because she's jealous of the demon guy from the box. It's so good. Quality content. My favorite graphic novel.
Right up there with Lewis Carroll and J.R.R. Tolkien's Stop the Devil. Content-wise.
It's good.
There's some real choice comics out there, dude.
Your imaginary friend says, don't use this wish box or I won't hang out with you anymore. And also when your imaginary friend is Avril Lavigne, maybe stop.
No, it'll never stop.
It's good. It's a really good...
so funny.
I had almost forgotten about that.
Oh, you can't forget about that. I remember it sometimes.
It's so weird you brought that up. I had to... Like, I didn't stop to dwell on it, but I just rearranged my bookshelves, and I saw it for, like, the first time in a long time the other day. And I didn't really appreciate...
You didn't really appreciate what an important part of the fantasy genre it was.
It's good. Although, you know, in all seriousness, a serious graphic novel recommendation, if you like fantasy things, Nightmares and Fairy Tales.
Oh yeah, it's really good.
Fantastic.
Yeah, it's just like it's very dark.
Each issue is done by a different artist, which is really cool. My favorite, I think it was the second one. Each one tells a different story, so it doesn't really... Right. You don't have to read them in order.
Dark fairy tales, if you can imagine.
But there was one that was done by Crab Scrambly, did the art for it, and it was just absolutely gorgeous.
Which one was what was the story?
The story was about the LaLaurie house.
I can't remember if I read that one.
I'll lend it to you. It's really good.
Is it in the first volume of it? Or is it in, like, the second?
I think it's the second.
Okay, because I only had the first volume of it, so that's why I wouldn't have.
Think it's, don't quote me on that, because it's been a really long time. I think it was the second one. It's good.
We'll figure it out. We'll get there.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So
read Avril Lavigne graphic novels.
Yes.
Because they're good for your health.
They're so good. I wonder if they ever finished. Do you think? Do you think they did a third?
Let's find out. Meanwhile, let's move on to part 3.
Tips and tropes. We should actually start with tropes first.
Because there are a lot of fucking tropes.
Yeah.
As it turns out.
So here are some fantasy tropes. The Chosen One, and this is something that we've talked about a little bit today. Harry Potter is a really good example of this.
They only made 2 volumes, by the way.
That's so sad.
Yeah, we'll never know the ending.
We'll never know what happens.
Oh, God, I'm gonna put that in the fucking thumbnail, though, because...
Does Hannah get... Just put Avril Lavigne.
No. It has to be this cover art. You guys will understand when you see the thumbnail, which you will have already seen a lot at this point. Okay, sorry, we'll get back into the tropes in a second. I just really want to talk about this Wikipedia page, because it's
Good.
Avril Lavigne, make 5 wishes, and then it has a little description, it shows the cover art, and then the sections are plot, themes, Avril Lavigne, notes, reference, and external links.
Good. That seems correct.
It's good.
Or as Avril Lavigne would say.
Avril responds, I know that many of my fans read comics, and I'm really excited to be involved in creating a story I know they will enjoy.
Wow. What a crazy time.
Okay, we're back to the tropes now. I just really
Alright.
needed to talk about the Avril Lavigne section.
Chosen One, Avril Lavigne.
What?
Billy Joe Armstrong.
Much better.
Yes. So, the Chosen One trope.
Yes.
A really good example, of the Chosen One, I do think is Harry Potter, because it also ties into the prophecy trope.
Which is another big one.
Yeah, later on the list. It's definitely... but the idea that there is one person who has been chosen by a higher power to fulfill some kind of task, or...
Right. And it's not always, it's like, usually, it's like not it's never like a choice thing, it's like they've been chosen by fate, and it's like, they usually have a special title, like The Boy Who Lived, or just The Chosen One, or Frodo Baggins,
or The Slayer, because Buffy also is based entirely around the
right, that's the entire
concept.
thing, as it turns out.
There's also... That's something that I do think is really interesting about A Song of Ice and Fire, is because they have that trope in there, but it's really unclear who the Chosen One is supposed to be. Because that's why Stannis gets killed.
Right.
Spoiler alert, Stannis dies. No one cares.
Wow.
He's the worst.
Yeah, that's true.
But that's why Melisandre convinces him to go into battle, because she says that he's the Lord's chosen one.
Right, he's the chosen one, and then he dies.
Refers to a prophecy that she wildly misread, because the Chosen One obviously is a Targaryen. It's a Valyrian Anyway. But yeah, a lot of fantasy things deal with the Chosen One trope.
I think it goes hand in hand with the fact that a lot of fantasy stories are coming-of-age stories.
Yeah.
It has a lot to do with, finding yourself and blah, blah, blah. So, obviously, when you're the most important person in the world, you got a lot to go through.
Right.
It's hard. It's hard. Sometimes it's hard to be the chosen one. Usually it is, because everyone wants to fucking kill you.
Yeah. It definitely makes you a target. That's actually one of the things I think was also really interesting about the Chosen One thing in Harry Potter, is because the prophecy that declares a Chosen One has, certain facts about the Chosen One, and there's, this list of things, and there were actually 2 boys who fit that description, and it's a self-fulfilling prophecy thing, obviously, but the reason why Harry Potter is the Chosen One is because Voldemort didn't know which child it was, and his trying to kill him as a child is what made him the Chosen One. Right. Because it also could have been Neville. The series could have been called Neville Longbottom.
I love Neville! He's so good!
Neville's really good. It's good.
I love him. But yeah, so lots of chosen ones.
Yes.
Like, they're all over the fucking place.
Yes.
Like, you can make an entire cast of characters out of chosen ones taken from different stories and fighting over who's more important. I'd like to see that, actually.
That would be fun.
Give me that crossover. Blizzard.
Nice. There's the wise old mentor trope.
Gandalf.
Gandalf.
It's Gandalf.
Yeah.
It's always Gandalf. It's the weird old man in Legend of Zelda who... Oh, I could have talked about Legend of Zelda for the Chosen One. That's like...
Oh, yeah.
The thing is, Link is constantly reborn in a new person to continually fight the struggles between him and Zelda and Ganon. Consistently, that's the whole fucking thing.
Yeah.
Except for Majora's Mask, where they're like, the moon, motherfuckers! Yeah.
Yeah.
Anyway, wise old mentor. That weird guy who gives you a sword?
Yeah.
That guy.
That's a really good example.
Thank you.
You're welcome. It's something that I'm torn because I kind of want to talk more about Game of Thrones.
You could talk about Giles.
Oh, yeah, I'll talk about Giles.
Because we love Giles.
Giles is a weird old mentor. They actually...
I like how you changed to weird old mentor instead of wise old mentor.
It's more accurate. Because I had a really big problem with Giles later on in the series because they tried to make him like a sexy rebel, even though he was like the librarian father figure. And it's like, I don't like this Giles doing open mic night, playing guitar. Please stop. It led to a lot of really good moments, and it was interesting, but weird was correct, I feel.
Yeah, that's true. He was weirdo.
But it's something... They actually have a council of wise old mentors in the Buffy mythology, because there's this group called the Watchers, who go hand in hand with the Slayers to train them. And they're essentially like these old librarian dudes who are like, we can harness the power of the Slayer, even though they really can't.
What are they gonna do?
Nothing.
They're gonna get punched in the face.
They get, because there's a thing they want to evict Giles, and Buffy's like, you can't do that, or I'll stop working for you. And they're like, you can't do that. And they make, like, a big deal about it, and then finally she's just like, I can, though, because I have all the power.
Yeah.
I'm the chosen one.
Who the fuck are you?
So, yeah. That's
a fun one.
Yeah.
So, the wise old mentor is, like, the dude that, like, has the pom-poms in the corner and is like, I'm gonna teach you how to do this, and you gotta do it all yourself after that.
Yeah.
Go team.
Yeah.
That's how I would describe Gandalf. Gandalf didn't do anything else.
What? What?
Gandalf do things?
Gandalf could almost do things. He talked to the eagles.
He did a lot of shit. Should have been about Gandalf.
That would have been a lot more interesting, honestly.
Because Gandalf is also a weird old mentor. Gandalf's fucking weird as shit, dude.
Yes.
Yes.
So, we've got our surprising heroine trope, which is kind of the response to the fact that fantasy was such a male-dominated genre. So then it became the new thing where it's like a woman overcoming that adversity and everyone's all surprised because she can fight or she can use magic or do whatever it is that women apparently can't do in the universe that's so surprising to men.
Right. Despite the fact that as a fantasy universe you can create the society however you want to.
Yeah.
You could easily put men and women on an equal playing field, but whatever.
It's something that we see a lot in
Game of Thrones?
Oh, definitely a lot in Game of Thrones, because there isn't, like, a one surprising woman. There are constantly women doing awesome things, and men are always surprised by it.
Because they're the fucking worst.
Yeah, Daenerys would be, like, a really good example of a surprising heroine, because, like, her brother's almost king, and then her husband is almost king, and then finally, she's like, you know what? I'd be a better queen than anybody. I'm doing that, and everyone's
it's
like,
me time.
She's a woman. And Cersei is kind of worse, but the same.
Right, she's not a heroine, but she's a surprising lady.
A surprising lady in power.
Right.
I was actually going to say it's kind of something that we see a lot just generally in those types of high fantasy stories that were based around European culture. Because the oppressive society obviously is supposed to be reminiscent of how oppressed women were in European culture, but it has turned into sort of a big fantasy trope at this point.
Right. I think one of my favorite surprising heroine things doesn't follow like the genre at all.
Nice.
Like it's the fact that Samus Aran is a lady. Because it's like you play through the entirety of the first Metroid game, and then she takes off her suit at the end.
Yeah.
And she's been a lady the whole time, and it's like, what?
That's good.
Yes! I love Samus. She's very good.
Very good. One of my favorites, Xena. I like Xena.
What? No.
Crazy.
Xena's good.
Xena's good.
Huh.
She's always surprising dudes.
She is always surprising dudes. That's true.
That's like the pilot episode of Xena. She's trying to have a redemption arc for herself, and everyone's like dragging her into all this other nonsense where she's always having to stick up for women. And then still at the end, the warlord guy is like, you know, you can't fight me because I'm a big, strong man. And she's like, I'll fight you however you want me to fight you, and I'll win. It's like, yeah.
God, I love her.
It set a really good precedent for the show.
Just like, real solid start to it, as it turns out.
Yeah. So that's actually, it's one of my favorite tropes, all things considered. One of my favorite fantasy tropes, all things considered. I've worked with it some. I think it's fun.
It's nice to have the whole thing sort of fall into place.
Yeah. It's one of those things, like...
I like proving men wrong.
Yeah. I get torn in between, because I do feel like we see so many oppressive environments for women, but still living in a world where I still feel somewhat oppressed, it's still nice to see the tables turned in that kind of setting. Right. So it's like, there are pros and cons to doing it. I like it.
It's fun. It's good times.
It's good.
When done right, obviously.
Right. Because sometimes it's just bad.
Yeah, sometimes it's just fucking annoying.
We've got our secret royalty trope. This is where an orphaned child or an adopted child secretly was the child of royalty in some way or another, and they inherit a bunch of power or a bunch of wealth or whatever, because the whole time
they were royalty all along.
Royalty. Yeah. Cough, cough. Spoiler alert, cough, cough, Gendry.
What? No!
Which... they did a bad job making that a secret.
Yeah, it was very obvious.
Then no one told Gendry for several seasons after that.
Gendry also just disappeared for a couple of those seasons.
That's true.
Gendry was fucking gone.
Like, we don't need to know about him. Even though he's maybe the heir to the Seven Kingdoms.
Maybe.
He's 100% not.
No.
But that's why they don't tell him. It's because they
likely.
think he might be.
Whoops.
Anyway, secret royalty.
My initial thought is another Legend of Zelda one.
Yeah.
Because in Wind Waker, Tetra initially showed up and is like a pirate and is like, and you find out later that she's Princess Zelda, and it's like, she doesn't fucking know any of that. But then she finds out, and it's good. I like Tetra. I wish they had... The biggest shame about that is, like, Tetra's, like, super badass, like, the whole time when she's Tetra, but then when she becomes Zelda, she, like, becomes, like, way more passive, and it's like, no! No!
That's something that really bothers me about Lord of the Rings.
Yeah.
Aragorn.
Fucker!
Because fucking Strider, dude! Best fucking dude in the whole thing, and then it's like, also, though.
Also.
I'm princely now. It's like, stop.
Don't do that. Fucker. Be yourself.
So yeah.
Oh, as of one that did it really well, I really enjoyed Wreck-It Ralph. Because that because that was Vanellope's whole thing, was that she was secretly royalty. And it was the best fucking thing when she got her princess dress back and was like, I'm gonna kill everybody. And everyone was like, what the fuck? She was, no, I'm not gonna do that, you fucking idiots.
How great
dummies.
would Wreck-It Ralph have been, though, if she had
She just kills all the other racers, Jesus Christ! But yeah, that was one that did it really well because it's like, even after she became royalty again, she was like, nope, I'm fine the way I am. I like this.
Yeah.
Also, I'm president now.
It was
Not
good.
a princess. It was good. It was fun.
That really is probably one of the best examples of that turnaround.
I guess there's a lot of fucking... Oh, Jesus, there's a lot of fucking Disney movies that do that whole secret royalty thing.
Yeah, that's a
fucking fairy tale, as it turns out.
Yeah.
It's just consistently.
That's more or less what fairy tales are.
Somebody learns something about themselves and has to go on a quest.
Yeah. Nice.
Disney princess.
Our last, character-specific trope, we've got homogenous races.
Mm-hmm.
This is something that we see a lot with... You know what I didn't talk about for worst examples of fantasy? I didn't talk about Bright, and I should have.
What the fuck is that?
That's that Netflix movie, that fantasy cop drama.
That what?
The fantasy cop drama with the...
Don't like that.
Don't watch it. It sounds a lot more interesting. It's one of those things, it was very... The concept could have been really good or really bad, and it managed to land... It's bad enough that you don't enjoy it, but not good enough that you get anything out of it. It's like, it's bad. Don't watch Bright, I guess is my takeaway from this. They confirmed, it was one of my favorite Netflix phenomenon, because they're like, Bright, a fantasy cop drama, and everyone's like, is this a real thing? And then it took itself really seriously, but not in like a funny way, and you're like, huh. And I like immediately forgot most of it as soon as I was done watching it, but the internet got really angry about it for like a few days. They were like, this is the worst thing I've ever seen. Netflix should be ashamed of itself. And Netflix waited like a week and announced the second one, and I'm like, what are you doing, Netflix? Dude. Anyway.
Wow.
But yeah, the homogenous races thing was really interesting because they got all of the tropes for like fantasy races into Bright without... in, like, a completely different setting, but they didn't fix any of the problems. And they didn't illustrate the problems the way that they thought they were trying to. It's bad. But this is where we get into, like, elves and dwarves, and, there are a lot of tropes, for the races.
Right.
I think the big one, because elves are always, like, portrayed as really snooty.
Right, they're...
in high fantasy.
They're basically, like, fucking, the 1% of fantasy races.
So that's fun. Yeah.
It's good. It's fun times. Dwarves are always, like, workers, drinking... having a good time, sort of.
Sometimes that gets taken too far. Movie adaptation of Gimli.
Oh, more Gimli. And then, like, orcs are supposed to be... My favorite thing is the latest trend to, invert, like, the races that are supposed to be, like, scary and mean. Like, orcs are supposed to be, like, real tough and mean and rude and... very, like, scary, and, like, so many of the things I see now is strong, cute girlfriend, tends flower baskets, and bench presses you, and I'm like, I like that.
It's good.
It's basically what happens with every fucking D&D character ever.
Yeah.
'Cause, like, every time, like, I see a player play an elf, they're, like, super snooty, and then, like, every time I see someone, like, play, like, a tiefling or an orc, they're, like, cool party dude, ready to get down. It's like,
it's fun.
Fun how we invert those things. It's good.
It's a fun time.
It's good. I want to see, like, some fucking 0% elves.
It's something that I really like about adventures.
Yeah.
Belthor?
Belthor is an elf.
Is an elf. I always forget about that.
Because he's just a fucking, sociopath.
Also, he's always, like, pickpocketing people and picking stuff up out of the trash.
Gotta get the banana out of the trash. What? Yes!
It's good.
That was the fucking thing.
That's our only elf.
Can I offer... I would like to offer the woman in the trash can a banana. Roll your kleptomania. I won't offer you this banana.
You can't have this, it's mine.
I fucking love Belthor. Belthor's good. I think...
My favorite elf.
I think it's because it's one of those things that we're doing, and, like, everyone's just fucking doing something weird.
Yeah.
It's good, I like it.
It's a lot of fun.
Just literally playing the, furry dog just as a fucking dog. He's fucking dumb as shit, but very happy.
That's, one of the other things is anthropomorphized beings.
So that's, like, it's furries, dude.
It's furries.
It's furries. So, like, Zootopia or any of the, like, American Tail, everyone's favorite Titanic movie, Titanic, The Legend Goes On, of course.
That also.
Anything with animals or non-humans being portrayed with... Cats Don't Dance. That's a good one. That's an actual movie.
Yeah, that's a good movie.
But anything that projects human characteristics onto animals, generally making them stand more like humans, is generally how it happens.
Animals are the big one that we see for the most part in fantasy. There's also, like, objects. Beauty and the Beast is a thing.
Beauty and the Beast is a thing. That's for damn sure.
Let's just toss that in there.
Yeah. But yeah, it's not just limited to animals, but I mean, like, that's usually...
It is usually.
Because animals are, like, you know, easy to project onto because we interact with animals a lot.
The Lion King.
The Lion King.
Also.
That's true.
That's one of those scary things where we don't know. I have a really tough time as an adult with some children's movies because I don't grasp how real they are or are not supposed to be. I don't know how literally to take animal movies. Because, like, my first, big one was, like, The Lion King,
right,
obviously.
Of course, because...
So it was, like, one of those things where it's, like, I took them literally as animals, but then, like, when they started... Because one of my other first ones was Cats Don't Dance, and it's, like, they definitely were more animal humans, and it's, like, I had a really tough time... I still, to this day, have a tough time finding that line, where it's, like, I don't understand...
Cat is intimidated by furry culture.
Yeah, furry culture is very intimidating to me. I had a tough time with Zootopia. I spent so much of Zootopia trying to figure out
what was going on.
What an appropriate level of projection was, like, I don't know. When animals start wearing clothes, I get freaked out.
Yeah, that's the part that always gets you.
That's the part that, like, really trips me up, because I don't know how dressed they should be. I don't know if it's, like, a stylistic, I can wear this because it expresses me, or, like, I have to be wearing this because...
It's clothes?
It's clothes. I need to be covered. Like, I don't that's... I'm very confused. I confuse easily.
It's okay.
My suspension of disbelief is not high.
Despite the fact that you read so many fantasy things.
Yes. Should I be offended that Donald Duck isn't wearing pants?
No.
That's what it all comes down to.
Listen. Here's the
Should
thing.
his bottom half be covered?
Mickey Mouse doesn't wear a shirt. But he does wear gloves.
That's bad. Mickey and Minnie Mouse are worse, actually, when you think about it. Do I need to be, listen, he doesn't have mouse nipples, so maybe it's okay.
It's the funniest thing about the fucking Sonic, because, like, all the dudes are just fucking not wearing anything. They're wearing fucking gloves and shoes.
I hate that.
And then, like, all the girls are, like, wearing dresses and, like, covering themselves up. It's like, what the fuck is the culture here?
Right, like...
Except for Princess Sally, who was in the show and then fucking never again. They never fucking addressed anything like that ever again.
That's the thing, like, if they would take, like, a second to address, to understand. If it was all the same thing, I'd understand this is what the culture is, and I'm comfortable with it. But no. I can never have that.
You can't. It's not allowed.
My suggestion for anyone using anthropomorphized beings is that you address the clothing situation right away for people who are easily confused.
Franza doesn't wear pants. That's just a thing.
Yeah.
That's Franza's whole thing. Right. I spent that whole campaign adamantly not wearing pants. It made everyone very upset. I don't know why.
Because what's Franz's culture? Is it weird? Like, okay,
Franza doesn't have culture.
No. If Franza were in Ruffsport, would Franza be the only one not wearing pants?
No.
Would Franza be the only one wearing a shirt?
Franza wears a shirt because they think it makes them look cool.
But would Franza be the only one doing that?
I mean, like, probably somebody else would also be wearing a shirt who also wanted to look cool.
I don't understand. Furry culture intimidates me.
That's the name of the episode.
Nice.
But yeah, we got some other tropes here that are just sort of other things that are always happening.
Yes. The medieval European setting we talked about, that's a big one.
Right. That's the crux of what a lot of American or Western fantasy is built on.
Yeah.
Just consistently.
All-powerful magical artifacts. And this goes into, the rings.
Right.
Lord of the Rings.
The one ring to rule them all.
And that's actually, because there were actually lots of rings.
Yeah. 7? Or 11? How many rings were there?
There were a lot.
A lot of fucking rings.
Too many rings. And then there was the one ring to rule them all. So, and that kind of ties into, because a lot of things incorporate magical artifacts that just boost ability, whereas a lot of things also have that one defining, like the holy grail of things. The one ring to rule them all. It had power over all the other rings. Or, like, the Sorcerer's Stone, the Philosopher's Stone. Harry Potter, we also end up with, like, the Elder Wand.
Right.
That's a big thing.
It's just the thing, it's the important thing that the bad guy can't get.
Right.
Basically.
Yeah.
No matter what form it takes, the good guy should have it and the bad guy should not.
Yes.
There's oversimplified good and evil, which is usually what you're going to see in more children's-oriented stuff.
Yes.
Is because there's a clear distinction between good and evil. And morally gray sort of comes in more when you get to, like, a more adult level of fantasy.
Although, that's, like, I think one of the, because we've been talking about how stuff derives from Lord of the Rings, it had a very clear-cut good and evil, which true. I think is why it is as widespread even in adult literature as it is.
Right. People like it when there's a clear distinction.
Yeah.
Like, not everybody digs morally gray like I do.
Yeah. A lot of people do. That's why Game of Thrones is popular.
Right.
But a lot of people don't.
It's particularly at the time it was published, there was, like, a more inclination to have that clear-cut distinction. I think having more morally gray stories is a more modern thing.
Yeah.
It's why we've transitioned from old Batman to new Batman.
Yes.
Also because old Batman was kind of a dick. But I digress. Robin got the short end of the stick so fucking much all the time.
Yeah?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. Anyway.
But here's the thing. Are you ready?
What's up?
Old Batman had bat nipples.
He did
and
have
I
bat
knew that they were supposed to be covered. That's why that movie did bad. Because we could see the bat nipples.
Because we don't need to see anything like that.
The clothing culture was established for Batman.
Right. Batman? Cover the nipples.
Yeah.
That's just life. Also, here's a fun thing. We're going back to the clothing thing. Kingdom Hearts Mickey wears a shirt.
I hate that. It throws my whole perception of Mickey Mouse off, and it's already so, like, wishy-washy. I already don't know what the...
I don't know how to talk
Mickey
about Mickey Mouse!
And then they gave him a shirt, so was it weird he wasn't wearing a shirt before?
No, he just needed something he needed to put zippers on. That's the Kingdom Hearts culture, zippers. Oh, no.
Does his shirt have a zipper?
Probably.
That's so bad.
Everything has a zipper in Kingdom Hearts.
Oh, boy.
You could put a zipper on your Keyblade and nobody would blink. It wouldn't even work.
Oh, fake zippers?
Fake zippers.
God. This is why I hate Kingdom Hearts.
No, Kat, no! Don't say that on the podcast! We're gonna lose our only subscribers because one of them is William and the other is Ben.
Nice.
Ben has already pre-ordered Kingdom Hearts 3.
That's bad. There are too many zippers.
Oh, bad. I'm so sorry you have to hear this.
Nice.
Let's get out of here. Let's
Okay.
move on from
There.
this.
The strange spellings and apostrophes in names. There's a big...
Fantasy writers just like to fuck things up.
Yeah, this was something that really bothered me when I first started watching Game of Thrones because I thought I knew how to spell everyone's name.
And you were wrong.
I was so wrong. The biggest one for me was Cersei, because I figured it was Cersei, like, from mythology, and it's
Right.
not, and it makes me so mad. Still to this day, because it's actually spelled Cersei, because it's like Cersei. It's like, I don't like that.
Too bad.
And, like,
you stuck with.
Marjorie is like Margeery.
Well, there's
bad.
also fucking everything with High Valyrian and being fucking
Yeah.
weird as shit.
But it's something that, or like, yeah, it's something a lot of people complain about because you can just like take normal names and if you spell them weird, they look like fantasy names.
Right.
And it really bothers a lot of people.
Especially if it's pronounced the same way.
Yeah.
That's my favorite thing, is when people, like, I have to spell names for cups, and people, like, spell out something really weird, and then they say, yeah, it's this, and it's like, what did your parents do to you? What did you do as a baby? What did you do in your first 24 hours of life?
Yeah.
It's always white people.
Always.
What's the fucking, there's the article, and it's like, the kid's name it's pronounced Caitlin, but it's Kaviiilyn.
Oh, yeah.
And it's like, who are you people? Don't do that!
Wow, I can't believe I'm gonna talk about this in our fantasy episode of all things. There's an episode of It's Always Sunny in Philadelphia where they have a character whose name is Shadynasty, but it's spelled Shady Nasty.
Oh no.
And it's like, they make it through so much of the episode before you see it spelled out. And it's like, that's so bad.
Oh no.
How did this happen?
That's how it is sometimes.
It's bad.
But yeah, putting apostrophes in names makes them look more like their fantasy things, when they're not.
Also, definitely, I'd say it's a bigger problem in science fiction, the apostrophes specifically. It's like, if you need to look more cultured, throw an apostrophe in there.
Or if it needs to be an alien,
Yeah.
like, take out a bunch of letters and put apostrophes instead.
So, it's something that a lot of people complained about. So I decided to toss it in there on
Nice.
our tropes thing. Prologues.
There's a lot of them.
Prologues, at first I was kind of offended by the notion of this, because like, prologues are just part of a book. Like,
right.
It's completely acceptable to have prologues. It's like a structural decision, and I was kind of mad that because I found it on a couple of tropes things for fantasy, and it's like, that's not... But what they're referring to, what a lot of people were upset about, is like big information dumps right at the beginning.
The exposition chapter.
Right, in prologues, and I'm really lucky in that most of the fantasy I've read does not have those.
Mm-hmm.
They are annoying when they happen.
Yeah, nobody wants to sit and read about something you don't care about, because you haven't engaged at all.
Right.
First thing. Like, nobody wants to just read a bunch of exposition at first.
Yeah.
It's not fun.
So, I tend to prefer fantasy that just drops you in and lets you find out all of that stuff through context.
Right.
Like Game of Thrones or Harry Potter.
And, like, everything else on this list, basically.
Yeah.
Yeah. Like, Alice in Wonderland just fucking throws you in and is like, you're down a rabbit hole, motherfuckers. What's up?
Yeah. It's good. That's how I think things maybe should be done.
Yeah, it's fun.
And
then it looks like the last one is here. Romance.
Romance, which we talk about in the romance genre, is something that goes better in other genres.
Right.
Some of the best romances are shown through fantasy. Where it becomes tropey is that in a fantasy environment where anything's possible, you have there are a lot of opportunities to quicken the romance with the concept that it is fate, or destiny, or a spell, or whatever else.
True love's first kiss, whatever.
Yeah, there are, like, a lot of romance tropes that are bad that tie exclusively into the fantasy genre.
Right, and it's, like, one of those things where it can be done well, but a lot of the times it's just sort of used to avoid character development and say, like, these characters should be together because fate said so, and it's like, I don't care, though.
Right.
They shouldn't. They hate each other. It's not good.
Yeah.
It's like the fucking... I never saw the princess... The Swan movie, that one. What's the name of it?
I don't know what you're talking about.
It was like a Warner Brothers movie. It was like The Swan Princess or something. It was based off the ballet. Or whatever. It's like, basically it starts and like these two kids like are betrothed to each other because they're both royalty and they like hate each other.
Right.
And they have a whole song like as kids and as they're growing up where they hate each other and suddenly like they're adults and she's really pretty and he's like, holy shit, I'm in love with you even though nothing has changed and I'm still shitty.
Nice.
And it's like they address it briefly because like, he says something, and she's like, wait, what do you like about me besides the fact that I'm pretty? And he's like, what else is there? And it's like, that's fair, because she's a bland slate of a character. But, like, so she leaves. But then the next time they meet, they're in love again, and it's like, well, hold on. Nothing happened here.
Interesting.
Yeah.
But that's bad.
Yeah, that's bad. Nobody likes that.
And romance and fantasy are both genres that are really dependent on your characters. So using the fantasy to explain your romance instead of your characters is bad.
Right.
Don't do that.
You don't want to... Don't substitute magic for character development.
And also, this is nitpicking... and a little bit off topic from the romance thing, but if you're adapting a well-established fantasy novel and you want to give your female characters something more to do, don't just randomly, like, tie their fate to a magical object.
Yeah, that's weird.
And marry them off and be like, female character accomplished.
Like, that's...
Like, what?
Who are you?
I hate that whole her fate is tied to that of the Ring thing.
God!
In the Peter Jackson movies. Like, they never explain that. And they throw it in, like, right at the end.
And I'm like, oh,
it's
that's
like,
done with. Like,
it's
not
bad.
done. Where are you going?
Anyway.
But yeah.
Yeah.
So that's a lot about fantasy, as
Yeah.
it turns out.
Those are our fantasy tropes. Our last thing, because we started... Oh, God.
Oh,
I
no.
broke the thing. We've got some tips for you.
Right.
And they pretty much are things that we say a lot.
Right.
Tailored to the fantasy genre. My first one, have a very heavy emphasis on world building when you're preparing, but not in the story.
Because like we said, nobody likes the big
the information
exposition
dumps. I would maybe avoid that. Just let it show through context.
Right.
It's harder, but it can be done.
Because if you have a well-established world and you follow your rules, people are going to figure out those rules.
Yeah.
Like, you don't need to spoon-feed it.
Exactly.
Unless it's, like, legitimately something that, like, you're telling a backstory or whatever.
Yeah.
And even then, do it well and do it entertainingly. Don't just do it through fucking descriptions.
And it kind of ties into my next tip. If you're working in a big fantasy world, I would recommend using short stories as writing exercises to develop that world. Because then you'll have stuff on paper, you'll have mechanics, you'll have lore, but you don't necessarily need to include all of that in your novel. You'll just have it for reference.
Right.
And it's a good way to develop your story further.
It's like one of those things where it's like, if you're going to have, like, divisions in the species, like, of a certain, like, race or something like that, like, for, like, my vampires, like, ones of different, like, they have different genetic modifications based on the bloodline they're sired from, and they have different eye colors because of that.
Yeah.
So it's like, make sure you keep that consistent. Like, just keep notes. Notes are good for you.
Notes are really good.
But yeah.
Include real world themes.
You need to relate to something.
Yeah.
Like, because people are gonna be entertained by the fantasy and relate to the themes.
Right.
Because as it turns out, you can generally get a couple of major themes across all works.
Right.
And those are always going to relate back to what people experience.
Yes.
So even if it's like an escapism thing like that you're creating, it's always good. You don't have to tie it back to the person's reality, but do it to some kind of real thing.
Yes.
Yeah.
It'll make your world more realistic and people will get more out of the story.
Right.
Know your market and your audience.
Don't traumatize kids.
Yeah.
Or try not to.
Try not to traumatize children. Try not to aim overly sexual content at preteen girls.
Right. Because, consistently.
Yeah.
Ugh.
Like, don't, and if you find out that, like, don't change your, this seems so weird to say in the context of the conversation came up in, don't feel obligated to change your art just because a different audience than intended is picking it up.
Right.
But, take that into consideration. Maybe.
Don't feel obligated to change yourself, but take your audience, whether it's intentional or not, into consideration.
Yes.
Because if you know that younger people are consuming your mature content, you need to, because people are going to notice.
You need to not keep doing mature content under the guise that it wasn't written for them while consistently continuing to pander to them because you know they're reading it.
It's like, you and I both started consuming mature content when we were younger.
Right.
But we never... The stuff we watched was never pandered to us.
Yeah.
Like, you watched a lot of horror movies.
Exactly.
I played a lot of fucking Diablo, like, consistently. But it was never a thing that I was like... This is for people of my age group. This is targeted at me. This is like, no, this is something I picked up.
Right. And like
from somewhere else and I just happened to enjoy it.
When Diablo 3 came out, it didn't like advertise to children.
Right.
And then still stay Diablo 3. Like that would have been bad.
Right. That's not how the thing can work, as it turns out.
Yeah.
I want to play Diablo. I gotta see if we fucking have it.
That being said, there is a level in Diablo 3 where you just fight teddy bears and unicorns, and I like it.
Hey, there was also the cow level in Diablo 2, which was the best. You can only go there once, yeah. But yeah, so it's like, if people that are, even if you didn't intend it, if you know people are consuming the content, even if it wasn't originally intended for them, you gotta be an adult about it.
Yeah.
Like, you gotta be responsible.
That also, I'm gonna talk about Nick Miller again.
Ooh.
Because he writes what he sees as a mystery that I think was intended for adults, but it gets really popular in the preteen, in like the young women age group. And he does his first book reading, and as he's doing it, he realizes that that it's too explicit for the age group that it's for, but it was one of those things where it's like, because you don't really control your audience so much.
Right.
But ended up not having to read that passage.
Well, that's good.
So, it was good.
And then the last one on here is read fantasy.
Right. Find some good fantasy, read it. Find something you enjoy, read that.
Right. Even if you don't enjoy more of the classic fantasy stuff, you can find contemporary stuff that maybe you'll enjoy more.
And we've been making recommendations all the way throughout this. I'd recommend Ocean at the End of the Lane. You can read it in like an afternoon, and it is a very good, all-encompassing fantasy thing.
Right.
You should read Ocean at the End of the Lane.
I should.
It'll take you an afternoon.
I have the day off tomorrow.
It's it's shorter than Norse mythology.
Oh, then that didn't take me very long.
And that,
man, the best thing about Norse mythology was that I got to read it in Norway. That was so cool.
That's like a really cool thing.
I was so cool.
Jealous.
I got to see a dog also when I was over there. That was another exciting thing that happened while I was in Norway. There was a dog!
Nice.
Of all the things that happened over there.
Alan, our international cultured man.
International dog spotter.
There is a dog.
Dogs exist in Norway! The greatest mystery is solved! But no. But yeah, like, sit down, get yourself in a good atmosphere for it. I'm always going to recommend Alice in Wonderland if you want something surreal and just fun, and it's going to make you feel good. If you're looking for darker stuff, we got plenty of those.
Yeah.
Like, all over the place. If you're looking for something really dark, read some Sandman. Because that first volume gets fucked up real fast.
And Dark Tower is really good. In terms of being a little bit offbeat from the traditional fantasy. It's really good.
So there's definitely, like, if you're looking for a certain flavor of fantasy, you can always just do a quick Google search and you'll be able to find something.
You can also, we talked about this earlier because they had our fantasy definition, but there's findmeanauthor.com that will recommend by genre authors for you to look into.
Nice. So yeah, I think that's about it.
Yeah.
It's good.
Fantasy's good.
Fantasy's good. There's a lot going on, and it's always enjoyable to work with. Because it's fun to stretch your imagination with it, because you gotta come up with so much.
Yeah.
It's nice.
It's also, I think it's my favorite genre to collaborate in.
Mm-hmm.
It's fun.
It's good, because it's also not only you exercising, it's also the other person, and, like, you can create a lot of fun hybrid stuff.
Right.
It's good. So I think that's about it.
Yeah.
And that's all we got.
Yeah. Bye, guys.
We have to do the outro.
Bye, guys.
This has been Unsolicited Advice. I'm Bubblegum.
Bye, guys.
Toxic, that's toxic, as usual, and we'll see you next time.
Bye, guys.
Bye.